going to be revival.
Amen. Amen. Every day that I walk with Christ, the more heaven becomes a reality.
Closer. Amen.
Get closer. World's not our home, folks. Been born again, we've been born from above. We ought to be longing for that place called heaven.
Amen.
Galatians chapter 6. I'm going to pick up from our Sunday school class this morning. We were talking about some of these things. We were talking about Lot in our Sunday school class and how Lot suffered the consequences of the decisions that he made in life.
Amen.
Galatians chapter 6 and verse 7. Do not be deceived. God is not mocked. For whatever a man sows, this he will also reap.
Amen.
Hollywood's abuzz this morning, if you didn't know. Hollywood was buzzing when you and I went to bed last night with regard to the death of Whitney Houston. I watched probably for 2 hours last night after the announcement was made concerning her death. And I listened to all that the worldly folk had to say. One of the things that struck me the most during the conversation was that she was raised in the church. She began her singing career in the church. It's an all too familiar story, folks. Somewhere along the road, she decided to leave the church for the world. I did the same thing. Thank God I made it back.
Amen.
Some more of you in here this morning that made it back as well. The cause of her death last night was all speculation. But we know that she had a long history of alcohol abuse, drug addiction. And so Hollywood this morning is faced with yet another tragic story of the lure of fame and fortune. I want to say to the young people this morning, all that glitters is not gold.
Amen.
The world is a very, very alluring place. The bright lights of Hollywood are beautiful. The bright neon signs of Las Vegas are beautiful. It's filled with many allurements, filled with many attractions. John refers to them as the lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, the pride of life. You know what's so alluring about reality shows today on TV? They promise fame and fortune.
Exactly.
And so Whitney Houston's story is familiar. Raising the church. Familiar with the truth. But somewhere along the line, like so many, she fell for the big lie. The world is yours. You know, you and I living in a society that is confronted with a multitude of problems today. One of the great problems that we are confronted with in America today is people do not understand that there are consequences to our actions. There are consequences to the decisions that we make today. This idea that man is not to be held accountable for the choices that he makes is a lie, a philosophy of the world that has dug us a deep, deep hole in our nation today. The decisions that you make today, young people, will follow you for the rest of your life. There's been another pressing issue in the media the last few days, if you haven't noticed, and that is government intrusion into Christianity.
Exactly.
The government wants to now tell the church that if they employ someone, that they must pay for contraception. Or they must assist a woman in abortion.
Oh, boy.
You see, here's the real issue that's defined as the separation clause in our government documents. The separation clause, its purpose was to keep the government out of the church's business.
That's right.
But you see, they've turned it around on us, and even many people in the church has bought the world's lie today that the church is supposed to stay out of the government's business. They've made us believe that. I wonder how long it'll be before you're told, if you're a Christian, you will no longer be allowed to vote because your Christian beliefs might affect who you vote for.
Wouldn't doubt it a bit.
The uproar, of course, was primarily with the Catholic Church, but I want to say to you this morning, it's not only the Catholic Church that is affected by this problem.
Oh, sure.
Richard Land, a leader in the Southern Baptist Convention, said this. He said, if the government mandate isn't changed, Christians will go to jail. Let me tell you something, folks. Jesus Christ brought me out of a pit. Brought me out of a slime pit. And I owe my life to Him.
Amen. We all do.
Regardless of what it may cost me. And the day that the government tells this preacher that he can no longer preach against sin is the day they'll put handcuffs on me and march me up the street. Okay?
Amen.
Amen. That's great.
And don't be surprised if you and I don't live to see that day in this nation.
That's right.
One of the Supreme Court justices of the United States of America was recently bashing the Constitution. She said that the United States Constitution was essentially old and outdated,
Oh, yeah.
irrelevant. She said there are better constitutions in other countries.
Oh, Lord.
And she thought that it was so old and so outdated that she, a Supreme Court judge of the United States of America, said she would not use it as an example. America's been headed down a slippery slope for many years, folks. And we are now reaping the consequences of our actions. Much of the guilt lays at the doorstep of the church. The consequences that we are now experiencing are negative. We're now reaping in this country what we have been sowing for decades. Now, my mother's here this morning. She'll testify to this fact. When I was a kid, my grandmother sometimes left the front door open at night. Didn't even lock it.
We did down here.
How many of you go to bed tonight and not lock your front door and make sure your windows are locked, your alarm system's on, and your gun's loaded?
Exactly. It's exactly the truth. That's the truth.
If America continues down this slippery slope, you and I will one day be slaves to the government.
Exactly.
Write it down. All because there are consequences to the decisions that we make. Consequences are inevitable. Can't get around it. They will come. Friday nights we have a drug and alcohol program, and one of the booklets that we used to use makes this statement. It says, we lose our freedom to choose when we give in to temptation. The consequences of our choices are inevitable, incalculable, and up to God. It's a fact of life. Whatever we do, whatever choices we make, whatever decisions we make, there is going to be a consequence. Whether it be in our individual lives, whether it be in a church, whether it be in a city, whether it be in a nation, whether it be in a government, there are consequences to everything that we do. That is a truth that no philosopher who has ever lived can deny.
Exactly.
The choices that you and I make today will affect us for the rest of our lives. Even physics, even natural law recognizes something called the law of reciprocity. A good example of that would be gunfire. A preacher owns 2 guns. One's a 9mm and